Welcome to the Disrupt Your Career podcast, brought to you by Claire Harbour
and Antoine Tirant. We're passionate about helping everyone find fulfillment in their work life.
We believe that big, messy, uncharted career changes are inevitable, and it's up to you to decide.
Will you take control and disrupt, or allow yourself to be disrupted?
We wrote the book about it, and now we share here our conversations with other thinkers in this crucial area.
Settle down and get ready to listen to this dose of wisdom.
So today we're welcoming to the Disrupt Your Career podcast, Sonal Bahl, who is the founder of an organization called Supercharge. She's a career strategist, and we're delighted to have her join us to talk about careers, career management, and all kinds of things today. Welcome, Sonal. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire, for having me. It's a pleasure.
Okay. So you're calling in from Brussels today, from just outside Brussels. I'm here in the south of France. It's a beautiful day, and we're delighted to be talking to you about all the things that you think, know, and do around careers. Let's start with a really simple background question. Tell us about how you started out in your career, the sort of influences that led you to work with people in the sort of HR roles that you've had over time, and also what brought about the recent shift towards career coaching.
Yeah, great question. I think, Claire, we have our little light bulb moments. They kind of come and go. And my first light bulb moment that I can think of was actually when I was 17, where I was studying business in school. And specifically, the subject was personnel management. And I remember reading it, reading financial management, reading marketing. And I remember being gravitated towards personnel. I had no idea what on earth it entails, but I just felt like it was calling me. So that's it. I was like, what does that mean? It means perhaps when it comes to college, let me study a little bit more about sociological things. I don't know what it means. I'll figure it out, but I feel like this has my name written all over it. So that's how it started, fascination with people. And at that point of time, and I think it is still the case, where people, loving people and all the good and bad and ugly that comes with it means that HR more or less is sort of the career path you should, I don't like the word should, you could try. You could, you could go in this direction. And that's what I did. HR, recruiting, the classic sort of things in HR. But I do have to say this. It's interesting to look back and see at which point were you the driver in the car or were you the passenger? And in my case, I've had a very interesting ride, literally, where the moment that I just described to you, I was the driver. Mm-hmm. And then I would say for the next 17, 18 years, I was the passenger, which makes me a tiny little bit ashamed, because when I talk to my clients today, I talk to them about being a driver, not a passenger, because then you can't complain where the car is going. And I think that's the difference, because when I was a passenger, I wasn't complaining. I actually liked where the car was going. So I was like, hey, you want to stop, get some, sandwiches? Oh, yeah, that's okay. Oh, let's continue. Let's go full speed ahead. That's fine. I never complained. I enjoyed it up until I did not enjoy it anymore. And then I went back to being in the driver's seat. And that's where I've been for the last couple of years with the career coaching and all of that. And by the way, when I started it, I had no idea there is something called career coaching, but I knew this is 2018 when I stopped. That was the last time I was in corporate. And I knew that I want to do something else, but what is it going to look like? And I thought I was good at a certain thing, but the market wasn't reacting. I was like, I want to do HR, interim management, help companies who don't have a large HR department, etc. Where are the calls? I wasn't getting the calls. Everyone said, you're so interesting. You've worked in so many countries, but what does that mean? show me the money, like Jerry Maguire says. So I was like, okay. So, and that is when I went back to being on the passenger seat. I didn't know what to do, but I was lost, frankly speaking. I have no problem admitting it, because I think it was the year I was lost and found. It took a while. I was lost and found when I got back in the driver's seat. I didn't know about the GPS, where it's taking me. So I, just knew that I love helping people, particularly people who are lost like me, a little bit like me. Maybe I'm just a few steps ahead of them. And I started creating some videos on YouTube. That's all I did. Helping people out with things that they don't know and things they wish they knew. HR doesn't share that stuff. And I'm like, I'll talk about everything. I'll talk about everything. I'm not going to hold anything back. And that's what I did. And then I started taking that content on LinkedIn. And that's when everything changed and people started reaching out and they started calling me a career coach. I'm like, okay, that's what it is. That's what that is. So here we are today.
Fascinating. I very much like that distinction you draw between being the driver and being in the passenger seat. Can you just tell us a little bit more about how you perceive that act of being in the passenger seat? You know, you say that you feel slightly ashamed of it, that it went on for 17 or 18 years. In what way would you characterize that being in the passenger seat?
I think, yeah, when I said ashamed, I think it's a strong word because life happened, right? Different stages of life, because we start our career in our 20s and I let a career dictate my life and I loved it, to be honest. I wouldn't have it any other way. And then when I got married and followed my husband to South America, if I hadn't done that, who knows, I may not have had an opportunity to go to South America. So I never complained, in the sense I liked where it was going. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's very important to just draw that distinction. If you're in the passenger or the driver, you know deep down if you like it or you don't. I'm not saying one is better than the other. I think there are stages in life you might need to be in the driver's seat and frankly speaking, take control because you've got bills to pay and things like that, or the passenger seat, same reason. So, you know, having done that and yes, I stopped. I'm sorry, I forgot one thing. I did stop. And it wasn't a break. I did a full-time MBA program with my husband following me back from South America. I followed him to Uruguay and Chile, where I by the way worked. You know, took back control there. Yes, I was in the passenger seat, but I was also sort of what do you call it? Backseat driving. Like, oh, this is where I'm going. I love where this analogy is going, by the way. And then I want to do an MBA. So the husband followed me to Europe, actually, to France, and then to Brussels, where the job brought me. So it's been a little bit of passenger driver. Now, particularly if you're in a relationship, you're not doing this in isolation.
Of course.
And I do want to say that because there are times when you need to let the other person drive or the other person ride. Whether it's the front seat or the back seat, you need to decide if they're a good wingman or not.
Absolutely. Just yesterday, I was listening to some work around the distinction between compromise and sacrifice, and it's such an important one.
Yes.
And inevitably, in couples that work, and no doubt you've read or looked at the work of
Jennifer, yes.
In this area, but of course there is room for roles shifting over time. And those that make that work well are those who are explicit about it. So good for you. I want to come back to the MBA with the newborn at some point, but let's go on. Tell us a little more about the cultural aspect of the work that you've done. You're from India originally. You're now in Brussels. You've been in several different places. You speak many languages. How have you found the navigation away from a country with a strong culture into all kinds of others and ending up now in Northern Europe, which couldn't be more different to India?
Yeah, sure. On paper, it does look like Western Europe, South America, India could not be more different. I don't know, for some reason, Claire, I've not paid too much attention to it. I always sort of led with, where do I stand here? What do I bring to the table? How do I fit in? And I don't mean it in a way that sounds like it's all about me, but more about what does this mean for everyone else? What I bring in. So there's a very fine balance that's been there for me between integration, assimilation versus separation and my own identity. And my own sense of identity, I think, has been a little bit fluid. And I'm proud of that because I'm not a huge fan of labels. Yeah, you said this, but you're from India. Yeah, I'm from India. So what's your point? It's like people are going there. They're going to put me in a box because it feels comfortable, because they put me in a, yeah, you live in Europe, so you don't really understand. I'm seeing a lot of this stuff right now in on my YouTube channel, where I have, for example, a video on salary negotiation. It's gone crazy viral, and I'm happy to see it. After 2 years of no activity, it's gone viral, and I'm getting so much response there. Yeah, but I'm from Germany, or I'm from here and I'm from there. It's not going to work. So I was like, that's so sad when I read that, because luckily for me, I did not have that. So there's two mindsets here: curiosity versus confirmation. I've always come from that curiosity mindset, thank goodness, because it's really helped me. And curiosity being, I wonder why he said that. Let me find out. As opposed to, I know why he said that. He's from so and so place, or he's an engineer, or he's a doctor, and that's how they all think. And in French, you say "carré." Oh, yeah, this is just the way they are, so square. With that type of mindset and approach, I've always felt that everybody brings something so cool to the table. Everyone's got something to say and a value. And the universality of culture, I know that sounds a bit, but that has actually saved me. When I was in a group of people, we didn't speak the same language. For example, in South America, I learned Spanish. I became fluent really quickly because I wanted to work. And in that part of the world, unlike, Brussels, if you don't speak the local language, you just stay home. You just quarantine yourself because it's difficult to communicate. You can't go to shops, nothing. There's always more that unites us than divides us. Always. There'd be some stuff to talk about. There would be like, I don't know, mother-in-law jokes, or making fun of, very light-hearted things that bring people together. I always saw that. And I was like, yeah, so I'm going to focus on that. And there'd be a joke and I'd crack it. I'm like, I'm not sure it meant the same because I said it in Spanish. Actually, when people get what you're saying and where you're coming from, the intention matters. And for me, it's always been about that. I'm speaking to someone who's in France, or, having lived and worked in France or Brussels. It didn't matter to me. It still doesn't matter to me. People are people everywhere.
And you're looking for the commonality at each stage. So let's talk more specifically about the work you're doing these days. You focus typically on a market of people who are actively searching for a new career, whether they're out of their former one or whether they're contemplating something new in the future. So whatever the reasons, they might be looking at something new. And you have a number of different approaches to the work you do. Tell us a bit more about what that looks like.
Right. There's two things. One is work I do, and the second is who I target for that, actually. And the who I target is actually, I literally think of someone like me 3 years ago when I was feeling a little lost, which I said back in 2018. So that sort of avatar speaks to me, because I don't have to invent a lot of marketing for it, because I know what that person is thinking most of the time, because I've been there. And it's very specific. It's very niched down. And that is someone with more or less 20 years experience, MBA, lived and worked abroad, multilingual, multicultural. That's important to me. And there somehow we click. Like I said, don't have to try too hard. I don't have to sell a lot of that, because people see themselves in me. And I think that helps when you're looking at, your ideal sort of customer avatar. And how I do it is I do it through a combination of coaching, mentoring, consulting, training. There are times when clients need good old fashioned coaching where, you're not leading them, but letting them take the lead. They've got answers from within. And I'm glad I did the coaching certification, because that helps me to be on top of that. And there are stages in our association together where they need mentoring. Honestly, it's like, okay, now what do I do with LinkedIn? Like, I don't know how to show up. So they don't want coaching questions. So there's a combination of all of that. And over 15, 20 years, Claire, I've just sort of learned so much, just like a lot of us. The thing I've done is I've ended up codifying it into specific templates and structures. And it's like this menu card, and I pick out the one that I feel like, I think we were talking about this today. This is what I've done. Let me share it. And then it's extremely contextual and extremely personalized to the person I'm speaking with. So that's the sort of combination I follow, where I know very specifically my one-on-one clients, I'm very picky about who I work with, because time is of the essence. And not only that, but I also need to ensure that I pick people that I know will be, we'll click together. Because at the end of the day, I don't advertise, right? It's a relationship, extremely relationship heavy business. And I have to say business because in the beginning I was a little afraid. I was like, how is it going to make money? But it's a business, you're in it to ensure there's, not a salary, but I want to hire people. I don't have people yet, but I want to hire people, and I want to hire people from countries where there's not a lot of representation, especially for women. So I can't do that by paying myself pittance. Like, it has to be done properly. So I pick out people that I work with who I know are, we're going to click well together, and they're going to give me a positive testimonial. I need that. Without that, it doesn't go anywhere. So yeah, the people I work with, and then the processes I follow are literally just, over 3 years of thinking about the previous 2 decades and putting it down in a very simple, codified, step-by-step form that I personalize with my clients.
Fascinating. And then, of course, you have all the various platforms on which you're sharing your content and your ideas. You've got a YouTube channel, you've got all kinds of other things. Can you give us a little picture of that as well?
Yes. When I started, I remember very clearly, Claire, my dad said, what are you doing? Like, what, you left your job, you weren't fired, you left, and I've been laid off. So my parents were like, what are you doing? I remember just saying very clearly, this is September 2018. I said, intention determines outcome. I don't know, but my intention is pure and I want to help. So everything that I've learned, Claire, I don't hold back. I go live every week on LinkedIn. I've been doing it for 62 weeks now, non-stop, every Friday without fail, come hell or high water. Everything I've learned, I share it. And people have questions, I answer. I don't hold back. I feel like good karma attracts good karma. So any situation, can you help me? I don't know how to do this. Suddenly, I'm like, got it. It's a topic. I'm going to create a video on it. And it's not, theory video where I've taken notes from a Google website. I literally take it and then I'm like, these are the mistakes I made. I wish someone had told me. It's very real. It's not for everyone. And then there's so many different scenarios. So there's live streams, there's videos, there's podcasts. I love interviewing people. I love what you're doing right now. I love interviewing people. I wish I could do it like all the time and extract what they're saying, because the interviews are, the podcast is called How I Got Hired. And it's very specifically about hiring and career change. I have a very one-track mind. I'm like, okay, you became an entrepreneur, right? How did you get hired by your first client? So it's very specific on that, because I feel like there's a lot of podcasts out there that say everything about everything. And I like the fact that you're also focused on careers and career pivoting. So through these channels, like, podcast and YouTube, and my favorite, as you know, and we said it before we, when we were backstage, is LinkedIn. It's my kind of people who hang out on LinkedIn. And I think the purpose there is just helping people to solve their problem while getting to know you and getting to like you. And that's it. I don't show up selling anything. There's no need.
It's so important.
People are like, when they speak, I've been stalking you for 6 months, and I'm like, yeah. And then I talk about you don't have to tell me that. I feel like I know you already. I'm like, job is done. Check. Mission accomplished. And you don't have to bend over backwards. And in businesses, they teach you, I had 2 business coaches, they teach you about how do you steadily raise prices without feeling guilty, etc. And that's the power of showing up on a platform like LinkedIn, where you feel like, okay, I'm getting more clients. Okay, I think it's about time I might have to increase prices. That helps when you're not out of the blue. Who is she? What is she talking about? And
absolutely,
how much? There's no way I'm paying that much, as opposed to consistency, the power of consistency.
Indeed. Power of showing up and the power of being comfortable with your number, whatever it is.
And then being quiet. When you say the number, I've learned this the hard way, because as you can tell, I'm a little bit talkative. You give the number and then you shut up.
You do. And the other fascinating thing is that I find, and I'm sure you do too, that you get surprises in both directions. I've had people with 6-figure salaries who can easily afford what I charge, who go, Oh no, I was thinking of something about, 10% of that. It's like, okay, fine,
No,
bye.
exactly. I've heard things like, hey, but in Belgium, I know your competitors who charge that much. I'm like, listen, you're more than welcome to go to them. This is me, that's them. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but we're very different.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're absolutely right. When we start off, they themselves volunteer information like, I earn well. Like, okay. But it's a question of priorities, right? And my coach said this on my podcast. Whether you want to spend $600 on Jimmy Choo's or a coach for that particular hour and a half, it's your prerogative.
Indeed. Let's move on. In the work that you do with the individuals that you coach and mentor, of course, you get to take the temperature of the way career management is being done, either by individuals or by organizations these days. What sort of trends and patterns are you seeing? And there's the obvious big one that's driven by COVID, but what are you seeing? What sorts of scenarios and problems are people coming to you with?
Yeah, good question. I'm not going to talk about COVID, and I think it's been done to death already in terms of trends and remote and virtual. I'm not going to talk about that. So one thing I didn't say is when people reach out, they're not always looking at a career transition. Some are also looking at strengthening their personal brand, getting taken a little bit more seriously at the workplace. And that's something called executive presence. And we work on that a lot as well, particularly with remote, because then you're like, hey, how can I get my voice heard? Because I said something, everybody was quiet. And then John said something, and everybody's like clapping. What the heck is going on? So first thing I'm noticing is there's more and more openness to coaching. And I think that's a good thing. Particularly, I'm coming from a time where in corporate, when we would nominate someone for a coach, someone to get a coach, it was sort of viewed as a punishment. Like, oh, what did he do wrong? And it's something to rectify. And that I feel like people are being more proactive. Mm-hmm. And that has been a positive thing for me to see in my interactions with people in corporate, both on the client side, like one-on-one client, but also like their HR and things like that. The second is, I think, emotional intelligence is the new black. We've always known EI, EQ. We know it's important. But I think now what I'm seeing is it's the distinguishing factor between good and great when it comes to leading teams, getting ahead in your career, getting that career change, making it work. Emotional, all of those 4 pillars in emotional intelligence, right? Self-awareness, self-management, etc. That I think is the distinction between actually seeing your career change through versus despondently sitting back in the driver's seat and complaining, because that's horrible. Passenger seat and then complaining about it. Because that's frustrating. And the third thing I think that my clients are talking about is, one is, of course, tech. And this is a trend I see overall. People always assume tech as a job, as a department. And I'm seeing more and more embracing of technology as a part of their function where they are today and becoming friends with it. It's like, I've been a little afraid of it. I might as well be friends with it. I'll give you an example. I have a client who's in the banking industry. She's very senior. She's from London. And now it's like, she's going ahead and doing all these online courses on blockchain and understanding how on earth all of this is affecting fintech. She didn't have to do it before. So I feel like it's becoming a bit more fluid, and people who are embracing it today, this is my job and that is tech. No. So this is my job and this is how technology is changing the way, we do our work today. I'm seeing that there's a lot of hunger and interest in that. So yeah, these 3, I think, other than, of course, virtual, remote, I don't want to talk about all of that, but openness to coaching, emotional intelligence is the new black, and tech not being a job anymore, but a very important part and parcel of a person's skill set.
That certainly resonates with me and with us and the work we do. If you look at things from the side of organizations, you've been inside organizations where hopefully you were setting a great example in the work you did in helping people to manage their careers. But beyond those places where you've been, what companies and organizations are you hearing about at the moment that are doing more? I mean, okay, we've talked about there's more openness to coaching. That's a great start. But are there any examples of companies where you would say they're doing a really good job in helping their people towards a great sense of being supported in their career management?
For a couple of reasons, I don't feel like thinking about names as of now, because for every great example, I may hear from a client who are like, yeah, that was, yeah, you know, when I see things like, you know what I mean, like top employer. I mean, I don't want to say these, but you know, I'm like, yeah, I'm not entirely sure how well these things are, you know, and I'm not even talking audited. I'm talking like on the ground, what's going on, like the iceberg. So I will say that I'm not a huge fan of vilifying, or how do you call it, holifying companies, that they're so great. It comes down to, and I'm sure you say this a lot as well, Claire, it comes down to the top leadership, the very, you know, exco executive committee. I feel like those companies that are, before COVID as well, they put people at the front and center. And I'm not talking customers, I'm talking employees. People, not process. I've seen, unfortunately, the opposite for quite some time. And it's a pity, where compliance is more important than relationships. Compliance is more important than compassion. So the opposite, when there is people, not process, and everything has to go around that, there is a way to make it work. And you know, the ones who do it and are successful are not the ones who are beating their drums on LinkedIn. They're too busy doing the real work and getting stuff done. And their employees, you know, are their best ambassadors. And also the combination, like I said, people and technology, because we're in 2021. Technology is a force for good. And the ones that are using it, you know, yes, we are in lockdown. Okay, this is the app. It's going to help you a lot with onboarding. Companies, you know, some of them have woken up to it because of COVID. It's a pity, but, you know, better late than never. But there's some companies that I worked with, for example, in this Dutch company. This was 2009, where we were told about work from home and you know, traffic, and how between 7 and 10 highways have completely been transformed in the Netherlands, because, you know, you didn't have to come in until 10 a.m. All of that stuff. I feel like when you're a little bit ahead of your time, that shows. And some companies today are ahead of their time, and they're probably being made fun of. But time is a great teacher. So it's a little bit of a long-winded answer. I think there's some great companies out there. I don't feel super comfortable taking names, but the ones that are doing great work, I tend to see that people are at their front and center, not process, not compliance, but compassion for their people.
I very much like that distinction of compliance and compassion. Definitely. Let's go back to you and your journey of doing your MBA with a newborn and having other career breaks. You can't see me, but I'm definitely putting inverted commas around that, because most of us who've done it know that you're not generally taking a break when you're raising a baby rather than going to the office. But tell us about what advice you would give to people who are either in a break now or trying to get out of one or considering taking one. How is that process best navigated?
I think that words matter. I think words have power. So if you think calling it a transition makes you feel more empowered, then do what you got to do. And somebody will say, yeah, tomato, how does it matter? It matters. I didn't take those breaks by choice, Claire. I was laid off after a couple of years in Europe, and we decided it's a great time to expand the family. And then I was laid off again in the other company with cost cutting and restructuring. So I was a little bit bitter, but when I approached companies, or when they approached me, and I think that's really important, and that's what I teach my clients as well as my viewers. Don't go with the I'm less than you because I have a break. I'm going to be so grateful if I get a job, because I don't have a job today. So that means I can't negotiate. Everything you've learned over time has not disappeared in your brain, whether it was a baby or studies or whatever it is that you did, or you traveled, or you did different things. I mean, if somebody told me I've been on a break, I'm like, what have you been doing? Yeah, I started my company for 3 years. It didn't work out. I'm like, that's not a break. Firstly, let's let's get our definitions. Let's get our, I was a freelancer. That's not a break. A break was literally when you were like contemplating and figuring things out. So I think that you have a certain USP, unique selling proposition, which has not changed if you were out of the formal workforce. And let's say someone who's listening today, who's been on a 1-year maternity, paternity, whatever it is, break. There is a way to do a SWOT analysis and see, okay, I have strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. My strengths are like everybody else. I have certain things I'm strong at. Okay. Weaknesses, you can say, yes, I've been out of the workforce. So there's a negativity bias. Yes, it's true, whether we like to say it or not. You are perceived as less desirable because you're not with someone today. Opportunity. What's the opportunity? Okay, interesting. I learned some things during this transition period. For example, time management, being organized, getting things done when the baby would fall, asleep. Okay, put those down. Like and there is a way to show transferability of those skills with the job that you're looking for. And another strengths, weaknesses, another opportunity is you're actually available. Most people need 3 months notice period, or especially in Europe. You could actually start like in a week. So use whatever you have today to your advantage, because not everything is bad and not everything is happening against you. It could even be happening for you. So SWOT, the T is, the threat is, what if you do this again? What if you take another break again? So you have to quash that. You have to quash that in interviews by saying, the reason for doing that, maybe I was taking care of a sick relative. Life happens to all of us, right? And maybe the reason for doing that, or maybe I was unwell, and the reason for that is no longer on the table. It's not relevant anymore. So there are different ways I teach all of this stuff, and it comes from tried and tested, true experiences, and that's what I think makes it come alive, because it's not preachy. But I really want to say this, particularly for women. If someone is listening today, you're like, yeah, I'm not going to get, I got a 30% increase in salary after being home for 2.5 years. And the only way I could have done that is by showing up, reading up, research. And the person on the other side is like, oh, I can't wait for her to work with us. And all of her to, the whole package. It's not, oh yeah, in spite of the fact that she's had a break, it's not an issue because I don't make it an issue. Do you know what I mean?
Yep. Absolutely. That's great advice. And I love the distinction about being available immediately. It's one that many people don't think of. And yet it is blindingly obvious.
There's something so attractive, Claire, about someone who looks hungry and they can start tomorrow.
Yes.
Because that's an attitude you can't teach someone to care.
Very true. Now, if we come back to your platforms and the way you influence your audience, you have a very bold statement in various places telling us that you influence or have the ambition to influence 400 million job seekers. Now, tell me about that number. Where does that come from, and how are you doing in terms of that ambition?
Right. I wrote that line as a description of my podcast, and I don't like the word influence. I think I used help.
Okay.
'Cause I can never really tell or dictate what other person's going to be influenced to do, but I can control how I show up, and I want to help. So at June or July of 2020, these are the numbers that came from the International Labour Organization that in 2020, 2021, 400 million people will be out of work. So the idea of starting the podcast was this. So this is what I say, and it's about the podcast. I am nowhere near, not even an iota close to that number. And that is fine, because it's a bit of a mountain to climb, and patience is a virtue. So and I talked about personal brand very briefly, and it's a very fancy word that means different things to different people. For me, it comes down to every single time that you show up whether it's on email, in person doesn't happen right now, but it will, on email, on social media, whatever social media platform of choice, or you've been invited to an interview or a live stream or a panel discussion, anything that comes out of my mouth, is it helping? Is it serving? Is it giving value? And is it me? I'm a little, today I'm talking a little bit about me, and it makes me uncomfortable because I'm not used to it. However, you invited me to the podcast interview, so it's your fault.
It's my fault. I
So
take full responsibility.
so it's like, okay. And there are different ways of doing it. And we live in the world today, Claire, where through something that's 10 by 4 centimeters, I can do that.
Yeah.
And why on earth will I not do that? It's like almost like this, it's a crime to not share everything that's been, that's happened to me, happened for me. It's a crime to not share and pass it along to people who need it right now.
That's beautiful. It's a lovely way of seeing it, and certainly this idea of service and support that underpins everything is so crucial. And as you were saying earlier, it's what makes it also easy to sell what you in the end need to sell to do the good that you want.
No, that's the thing I have on my website is values. Number one was compassion over compliance. Mm-hmm. And where, as an example, not everyone can afford a one-on-one coach. I'm like, okay, so just as an example, what do you need? Where can I meet you today? What is it that you can pay that doesn't disrupt your household budget? And okay, we have a 90-minute session. Oh, looky there, time's up. It's 91 minutes. I don't do that. So that's important for me. So compassion over compliance. And second is relationship over revenues. Because I feel like you take care of the first two, relationship and compassion, I think that the rest figures itself out,
Absolutely. So just to wrap up, what's coming up next? You're on a journey, you're climbing this mountain. What's next and exciting for you?
Yes, climbing the mountain, going back to the analogy in a car. So it's driving up the mountain, exciting, a little bit terrifying, particularly downhill. I really, so I love my one-on-one client work. I love my one-on-one clients. And what I want to continue to do is the podcast and grow it. And I'm hugely, I think a lot about people who need help but can't afford help. They reach out and they're desperate and they can't pay rent next month. So it's a little unfair for me that my one-on-one clients are paying me top dollar, but they already have money. So what about others? So I have started a membership program, which is very much in its infancy today. It's called the Supercharge Club. And at the price of a monthly Netflix subscription that you pay today, you get access to me 2 times a month. We do live coaching and there's a bunch of, trainings online. I've developed that over 3 months and it was launched in January. It's very small today. I'd love to see it grow. And although, so this is specifically helping people with little or no budget from, lower purchasing power, countries from lower purchasing power. And also I want to do short, easy courses because not everybody wants or needs 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 euro coaching. They have a very specific problem and how can you solve that? So I'm working on that right now to be able to help people where they are today, where they don't have to break bank to have a successful career.
Wonderful. That's a very open and generous way of looking at the raft of problems that are being tackled in the world of careers. Okay, Sonal, thank you so much. This has been fascinating. You've been really disciplined and generous with your answers. You warned me that you might be long-winded. I found you just fascinating. So I think we've hit the right balance and I want to thank you. We will make sure to put references to your website and your various things in our little blurb around this podcast. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor.
Okay, well, I've no doubt that we will continue to communicate offline and away from this because I think we have much that we can do to help each other and learn from each other. But in the meantime, on behalf of all of our audience, then I wish you a wonderful day. And again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Claire.
We hope you enjoyed hearing from this month's guest as much as we did.
Do go and check out our work on disrupt-your-career.com and come back soon. Thank you.